If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. Today we are talking about technology and solving cold cases. There's been quite a few cold cases solved in recent years, decades old, based on new forensic evidence, DNA testing, etc. And we'll be examining how that all plays into all these other cases that are not solved, where there is evidence, and other cases where there's no physical evidence, but they could still be solved based on other technologies and what those technologies are, and why they would or wouldn't be used even though they exist. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can help support the channel, help us make more mind-shocking content, and bring awareness to a lot of these cold cases. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Still not working, you can just go to youtube.com/truecrime, youtube.com/MindShockTrueCrime, or if you want to look at other non-true crime mind-shocking content, youtube.com/MindShock. Like and share this podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. You could also help support MindShock through Patreon. Just check the description. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So obviously DNA is the leading technology. DNA testing technology is the leading technology in solving old cold cases, but DNA technology is also one of the leading technologies in being utilized to falsely convict innocent people. And this is something I've talked about in a number of podcasts, how newer generation technology is, of course, superior to previous generations' technology. Moore's Law, obviously, technology progresses exponentially. And the thing that doesn't quite change is the scientism psychology. So, for example, in the 70s and the 80s, all these people were being convicted on DNA evidence, and the people testing this DNA, corroborating lab results, prosecutors making their case in court, and the jury listening to this as if it's indisputable scientific fact. It's using fallible human technology, which is, of course, fallible. So nobody reads the fine print. Now, a lot of times, even a paternity test, it'll say 99% accurate or 99.9% accurate. Well, if it's 99% accurate, so for every 100 people taking the test, one of them is going to be wrong. I mean, this is a life-changing test. For every 1,000 people, that's 10 people. For every 10,000 people, that's 100 people getting the wrong result, potentially. I mean, if we're just looking at pure stats, obviously, real-life results may vary. It could be a lot less or a lot more, but if we're taking it at face value, so for 1 million people taking a paternity test, that's 10,000 people and 10,000 families that could potentially be living with the wrong result. Now you can say, okay, take the test twice. Yeah, sure. Take it 100 times. You'd really have to take it. I mean, you could say, yeah, you'd have to take it 100 times to really get it much more within the realm of for sure. But again, we're dealing with fallible human technology here. If a particular individual, for whatever reason, let's say they have some kind of issue with the way their genetic marker is showing up, and the test, for whatever reason, it has some kind of interaction with the test, there's always other variables. It's not 100%. So but at the time, all of the people, all of these humans involved, they think it's definitive scientific evidence, and they're going to give a conviction on it. They're going to put their faith in the so-called scientific test. So they put their faith in it and hope they got the right guy. A decade, 2 decades, 3 decades later, new DNA testing reveals that the supposed DNA match wasn't actually a DNA match. And this podcast is not about police corruption or any of that. It's not about lab corruption or switching labels, which is how a lot of corruption happens. It's not about that. Let's take that out of the equation. Let's pretend. Let's only address the issues where all law enforcement and court officials are acting in accordance with the law, and they all have character and integrity. So, and they all think they actually got the right guy because they're putting their faith in these scientific tests. So everything's on the up and up, but they don't realize that the test is perhaps more fallible than purported. Now, whenever any kind of so-called revolutionary scientific technology comes about, there's money to be made. There's obviously money to be made in DNA testing, in DNA lab testing. All these people need to be paid. All of this equipment needs to be purchased. So it's kind of, in a way, again, it's not a direct comparison. This is not part of any formal logical argument, because someone could say this is a non-congruent logical fallacy, which it would be if I'm trying to make an argument. I'm not making an argument that these are the same things. I am just offering food for thought to perhaps lead us to a more logical position in general. So, for example, oil companies, all of these cars are dependent on gasoline, gas stations. It's big business. It's literally trillions of dollars. So any kind of, for a very long time, and look at it, even now with alternatives, and I know it's very controversial and it takes a lot of oil and all of these artificial means to manufacture these batteries and rechargeable solutions for electric cars. This isn't about that. I'm just saying the technology, even when the technology is always going to pose itself better than it actually is. It's just human nature. When people invent things or revolutionize things, they're always going to pose it as the best thing since sliced bread. And it might be partially true. Of course, DNA testing can be very effective. You just need to understand exactly how the matches are made, how the extrapolations are made, what is a degraded sample. And all of these things have to be kept in mind, which when I'm looking at all these true crime case discussions online, even in the comment section, DNA matched, jury found him guilty. That settles that. Let's pretend there's no such thing as a wrongful conviction. Let's pretend the Innocence Project doesn't exist and never actually helped anyone. Let's pretend all these jurors are all completely infallible. It's just such silly Dunning-Kruger nonsense. I really don't know how anybody can make these arguments with a straight face, but they do, and they're all over these comment sections, and even true crime commentators and very popular YouTube true crime channels, they make these same basic errors in putting their blind faith in the infallibility of DNA tests. Now, once you understand how DNA tests work, if you haven't checked out DNA for Dummies, there's 2 episodes in the Stephen Avery series on MINDSHOCK, DNA for Dummies. I'm actually going to do a follow-up, a 3rd episode, because there's even more to discuss on how DNA works and all of these things, and crime lab corruption in the Stephen Avery case. But it's not that simple. A DNA test isn't a magic button where it gives you a 100% black or white yes or no. In certain cases, its efficacy is possibly in ruling out certain suspects, but not necessarily in matching. Whereas it maybe matches some guy, maybe it doesn't, maybe it matches other people, but it can exclude certain people, and that's where the true value is. Because if someone has certain genetic markers, if they're simply not present, again, on a non-degraded sample, if it's a very degraded sample, it can be showing up in the fallible human technology as not present, even if it is, for whatever reason. Again, there's always unknown variables. This isn't rocket science, but for whatever reason, a large percentage of humans just don't understand that there are unknown unknowns. And I was going to do a podcast on variables, known knowns, known unknowns, unknown unknowns. And so all of these things that are critical, not only in solving cases, but just in general approach to life and looking at any topic and examining any evidence. Because to hallucinate that humans can't be fallible, or to hallucinate that all information is always known, or there might be variables unknown, but somehow they wouldn't affect the result of something. That's another thing I see. There's a certain percentage of people that do admit, oh yeah, there's unknown variables, but they could never be substantial enough to change a certain conclusion. And I don't know, and is that even sillier, because they're smart enough to know that there are unknown unknowns, but somehow they're going to hallucinate. They can't change an outcome or a conclusion. I don't know. It's quite bizarre. But then again, that's why MINDSHOCK exists, to examine all these logical fallacies. So DNA testing is definitely a big one. Now, as DNA testing gets better, obviously that's a good thing, because all these innocent people that are in prison based on so-called DNA matches, they're let out. But should they have been convicted in the first place? And is there a repetition of error here? Because now everybody's thinking the same thing. Oh, well, yeah, the previous technology wasn't that great, but now it's really good and it can't be wrong now. And then in 10 or 20 years, of course, we'll see the same thing. History does tend to repeat itself. Now, will we see the same thing on the same scale? Probably not, because obviously the technology is getting better. But to hallucinate that it's infallible, and to even admit that the previous generations were fallible, but now this generation is infallible, very, very silly. But as DNA testing does progress, we might be able to see more accurate matches, even from degraded samples. Obviously, you have to be able to prove that exactly how it works and account for all the variables, which has not been done in cases. But if you do that, then yes, then you can really use this DNA evidence to solve more cases. And I'm not going to be spending a whole lot of time on that, because that's kind of, people already know about that. A lot of these cases now, they're being solved with more accurate and better DNA technology. And as long as that variables are accounted for, that's really good. I still advocate for not using solely DNA evidence. So again, we're talking about standards of law. For a criminal case, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, not within. So if we understand that DNA technology, all human technology is fallible, you can't put all your faith in one piece of evidence. You would need more than one piece of evidence. Now, false eyewitness testimony, either intentional or not, because obviously humans are fallible. Now, let's say a lot of times, obviously the police really lead people to believe that it's a certain person. And even just through subtle, not even outright corruption, just through subtle influence, possibly not even intentional. I mean, body language, tonality. If an officer really thinks a guy with a rap sheet is guilty in a lineup, there might be some things that the witness is identifying and picking up subconscious-wise from the officer. So again, eyewitness testimony is, I believe that's the number one cause of wrongful convictions. False testimony. And then, of course, when people are trying to set people up, they're going to say they saw somebody. So you can't really rely on witness testimony in general. And the thing that's kind of mind-shocking about eyewitness testimony is that people know eyewitness testimony is not reliable. And yet there's so many people convicted on eyewitness. It's really bizarre. So eyewitness testimony, I wouldn't say it's useless. You definitely could use it even when they're lying. You can use it if you can show that they're lying. You can use it to expose some kind of frame-up situation, or just people with vendettas, things of this nature. You can expose that. So I'm not saying eyewitness testimony shouldn't be regarded or allowed. I think it should. It just shouldn't be. There's just no way to include that in beyond a reasonable doubt. So you need physical evidence. So, for example, obviously security camera footage is great. Again, by itself, if you don't have them committing the crime, but if you have them placed in the vicinity with multiple cameras, multiple security footage, that's helpful. That's part of beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a piece of it. And then if you also have physical evidence, DNA evidence, possible clothing with your DNA, that's another piece of evidence. So you need to have multiple pieces of evidence. If you have multiple pieces of evidence, not even necessarily a murder weapon, obviously murder weapon is everybody, to really wrap up a case nicely, it's helpful to have a murder weapon because it's difficult to prove otherwise. But if you have a mountain of evidence in different categories, that's really the way to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And a lot of the true crime community and people commenting online about this, they simply don't reference other cases where there is definitive evidence. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. All the boxes are checked. And it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Even though we can't say 100%, we're pretty much for damn sure this individual, either through prior history, physical evidence at the scene, their own possible confession. And again, confession is not beyond a reasonable doubt at all. even when it's not coerced. Obviously, a lot of confessions are coerced, but even when it's not coerced, there are mentally deranged people out there. This is not mind shocking. There's people who either want attention, there's people who just have a disconnect from reality, and they really think they committed a crime when they didn't. And a lot of that is just being treated as guilty by police. It's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but anybody that's been involved with the justice system knows in far too high of a percentage, it's guilty until proven innocent, unfortunately. And to a mentally unstable or someone with a mental condition, this kind of treatment can lead them to believe they're guilty even if they're not. Again, everybody's unique. Some people are very sensitive or have psychological conditions. This is not that mind-shocking. So either way, even a confession doesn't really... A lot of people put stock in confessions. I would say that's probably the least important thing. I mean, the words of humans can't be trusted. It's just that simple. It's that simple. Humans are fallible and humans lie. That's why we need scientific evidence. Now, we can't confuse scientific evidence with fallible human lab results. But if we have, for example, if the suspect left a hair and some bodily fluid, and there's a security footage at least placing them in the general vicinity, possibly a history of violence, all of these contribute. If there's a strong motive, obviously the motive doesn't really matter, but it helps. If somebody's, again, disgruntled employee or someone who was wronged by someone to put them in a fit of rage, by itself, it means absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because there's plenty of people. Again, you could even look at, just take 10 random people in the world. I would bet that at least some of them have, if they were crazy, and they wanted to kill somebody and they were looking for any excuse, they'd have some kind of motive. Somebody wronged them. Somebody, said something mean to them, looked at them wrong. They got unjustly fired, unjustly treated. Their significant other cheated on them and left them. Whatever the case may be, if you're a murderer, there's plenty of motives to kill people. If you're insane and you just want to kill somebody, you'll find ample reasons. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. I mean, there's plenty of cases of this where someone snapped because of one of these reasons. So motive by itself, not much. When you're including it in beyond a reasonable doubt, very helpful. It all contributes to beyond a reasonable doubt. But of course, definitive scientific evidence would have to be first and foremost, but that doesn't mean only a DNA match. You need more than that. So what other technologies do I talk about? Of course, the rapidly evolving cell phone technology. The thing that doesn't quite make sense, in certain cases, for example, the Amy Mihalovic case, there's some confusion on police not being able to trace calls. I mean, this was 1989. So we're not talking ancient history here. We're not talking telegram times or the early years of the telephone. Even then, from the switchboard, you should be able to trace. But is new technology developed now going to be able to assist in some kind of technological tracking in the past? Now, here's one of my favorite things to discuss is, of course, the Echelon Spy satellite system. Now, if you're a flat earther, that's fine. It could be any kind of satellite. It could be high altitude air balloons. It could be high altitude planes flying around. Whatever the case may be, the military is obviously very interested in surveilling every inch of the earth, particularly metropolitan areas. So the Echelon system, of course, was started in the early 90s. So somewhere in the early 90s, the Echelon spy satellite system started. And if that's public information and military tech is anywhere between 30 and 50 years ahead of civilian tech, what kind of tech did they have that they never disclosed, and how early did they have it? Now, I am not alleging that they have satellite footage from the 50s or 60s. I mean, maybe they do. But what about the 80s? And then, of course, the early 90s. I mean, it's known that they have it from the early 90s. They could place people. They could track cars. I mean, there's so many cases that could be solved using this satellite technology. And obviously, the NSA doesn't get rid of everything. We're not talking about some kind of moon landing situation. where they magically lose 18,000 reels of telemetry data and supposedly the greatest human accomplishment of all time. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the NSA, spy satellite systems. You bet they never deleted anything. All that footage exists somewhere. And I don't want to go out on a long aside about the moon landing. I'm not alleging it was faked. I'm alleging that my dog ate my homework excuse does not meet up to standards of extraordinary claims. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, not my dog ate my homework and inability to replicate. Because again, just factoring Moore's law, logic would suggest that if they went to the moon in the 60s, that there would have been moon tourism in the 90s. We're now in 2021. So not necessarily NASA, even though they had the budget for it, but all these private companies like SpaceX, they've already, I remember, I think 2008, I think so in 2000, what was it, 2004, 2005, they were already making plans, or in 2008, they were making plans for 2011 or something of that sort. I think they already were selling tickets, or they were just putting the ticket prices up. I don't know, maybe they weren't officially selling, for moon tourism, for spaceships circling the moon. And again, according to Moore's law, the exponential rate technology advances and becomes cheaper. I mean, this is empirically verifiable. I mean, look at what your cell phone can do today compared to one of these $1 million computers from the 80s. So not only would moon tourism exist, but it theoretically shouldn't have to be incredibly cost prohibitive. I mean, it'd be expensive most likely, but not in the 7-8 figures, in thousands, tens of thousands, maybe like possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars. I would say cheaper, because if you're taking a gigantic spacecraft, you could split that cost up. Because even if it costs millions to run, I mean, most of that would be research and development, and then after that, it's mostly just fuel and staffing. But yeah, it would cost, I don't remember what the estimates were. Somewhere around $1,500, was it? The early estimates by the year 2011, then they pushed to 2015. Then they pushed it to like 2018. And then, of course, it'd be like a cruise ship. If you wanted the luxury quarters, it would obviously be a lot more money. But for the super basic package, it would not, it would supposed to be run in the 4 digits. So very affordable. Whatever happened to that? Now, that doesn't mean they didn't go to the moon. There could be another reason. If there was some aliens or interdimensional entities on the moon, which made it too dangerous, but they didn't want to admit that. There's a whole bunch of different scenarios where they could have still went to the moon that explain why there's no moon tourism today. But that's not what this podcast is about. So all of the satellite image data covering most of these first world countries and metropolitan areas, they must exist. I don't think it's outlandish to believe the possibility that all of this exists. Now, one could argue that the reason that the NSA or the US government didn't want to release these satellite images in the 90s, even early 2000s, because they could say that it just posed a threat to national security to have this kind of technology. But what's the excuse today? Now, all of these advanced military countries, they have satellite surveillance in some form or another. What is the drawback in the U.S. revealing it? They might have had it earlier than they did, and they technically already did. The Echelon spy satellites, the Echelon spy satellite system, that's already been declassified. That's public. I mean, the movie The Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman, I mean, that came out in what, 97, 98? It's all known by now. So what's the harm in saying the U.S. might have had it earlier than it did? And did the countries they're trying to avoid having know this? Don't they already know it anyway? Especially by now. Maybe at the time they didn't, in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever this was going on. But now it's all known. So many cold cases could be solved, or at least potentially reveal new leads, which could lead to them being solved, by simply releasing the images in question. They technically would have had 24-hour surveillance on every metropolitan area on Earth, if not in the US at least. So, yeah, I really don't know the case against releasing it. And is it even possible to petition and FOIA satellite images? I mean, I don't know. Like, at this point, if it doesn't threaten national security, why not solve some of these old cold cases with this technology? And what other surveillance technologies were available much earlier than known? So the U.S. military was using cell phones since what, the 50s? Wireless transmissions since what, the 10s? If not the 20s, whatever it was. So it's quite curious what other unknown technologies are present. I mean, they're already using Alexa and these other technologies to solve crimes because it's always recording. I mean, remember when the coincidence theorists thought it was silly that your cell phone was keeping track of you? I mean, I think it took the ads when there was a conversation, someone would check their phone, and then the Google ads were whatever was being discussed, whether it was a particular type of clothing or cell phones or TVs, whatever. All of a sudden, even though there was no consent form, and the coincidence theorist maintained for a good number of years, and that's kind of their MO. The cognitive dissonant coincidence theorists, the authority-worshipping cultists who never think that any kind of conspiracies, more than one person or corporation just trying to make money via nefarious means, that it just wouldn't happen. And then it's just kind of a history repeats itself where no matter how many times it happens, whatever the new conspiracy theory, whatever the new critical thinkers are saying, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, maybe the other stuff was done, but they would never do this. And it's just like a broken record. But coincidence theorists, always good for a laugh. So what other technologies were available that nobody knew about? And what technologies are around now? I mean, would it surprise anyone if there were all of this nanotechnology, surveillance technology, microscopic cameras? Are there bugs flying around right now, or fake bugs with cameras in them, just randomly recording things? What other random recording devices are present all over the place? Or at least in major cities. You have traffic cams. It's kind of crazy. If you haven't checked out the Jennifer Kesty case on MINDSHOCK, now this case was 2006, and there's surveillance footage at a really low-rent, shady apartment complex, but apparently they couldn't pull any other CCTV footage from traffic cams or anything else. It's just crazy. It's really, really crazy how even in all these cases post-2000s, post-2010, they can't put together surveillance footage with the amount of surveillance going on today. And even today, when everybody knows about all of the satellite imagery, or whatever you want to call it, it's still not used in cases. I mean, you could literally track vehicles via satellite footage, and it's still not really done. Why not? Why not? I would say that's one of the number one things that could lead to more cases being solved, even cold cases. Even cold cases, and the government obviously had technology in advance of what is known and many years prior to what is known. So how far back is there high altitude balloon or satellite footage? 80s? 70s? 60s? I mean, there were hot air balloon flights in the 50s. I mean, they were recorded, obviously. If civilians are doing it, how often is the military doing it, and more stealth-like? And how much footage exists of all the Earth? And then similarly with audio recording, I mean, all cells are recording basically at all times. Now, obviously you have laws preventing that just being randomly pulled. But if you have parties that are willing to sign away that, but I guess the government wouldn't want to admit that they were recording 24/7 through all devices, all smart devices. But there's so much technology available, and it might have been available a lot earlier than the masses think. Again, we have to keep in mind Moore's Law and how top secret government technology operates and what time frame it is revealed to the Dunning-Kruger masses, to the clueless masses, the sheeple and the lemmings, for those that don't really want to think about it. But it could help a lot of these cold cases. So that was the topic for today. Feel free to leave your own thoughts, theories, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind in the comment section regarding technology being used to solve not only common cases, that's all quite obvious, but some of these older cold cases. If you enjoy the podcast, you want to support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. You can also like and share the podcast, share it on social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topological analysis, co-podcast requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.